have a rendezvous with death. We'll preserve the last best hope of man on Earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for downloading, listening, and sharing. My name is Frank Salvato. You can find all we do at undergroundusa.com. While social media and the information sphere buzz about the drones inundating the coastline approximate to New Jersey and New York, I can't help but wonder if we're being blind to the real problem here. With credible reports coming out of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that radioactive material was lost in transit earlier this month from a cargo ship headed into New Jersey, the simple explanation that the NRC and or U.S. military is searching for the material becomes probable. Also credible, but further down the list, comes the truth that 80 nuclear warheads that existed in Ukraine during the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1980s are unaccounted for. According to John Ferguson, CEO of Saxon Aerospace LLC and an expert in unmanned aerial systems, as reported in GatewayPundit.com.
Back in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan had dismantled the nuclear program with Russia. There were countless nuclear missiles that were disarmed and disposed of. Well, there were over 80 nuclear warheads that were in Ukraine that came up missing. We don't know where they are, maybe somebody does, but nobody really knows where these are. I speak with some pretty high-level government officials on this stuff. It seems as though that is the case. I spoke to a gentleman a few months ago who was trying to raise an alarm to the highest levels of our government who had their ears closed about this one particular nuclear warhead that he physically put his hands on. He physically touched this warhead that was left over from Ukraine, and he knew that the thing was headed towards the United States. This is a very serious deal.
If in fact this is the case, that the drones are of the U.S. government in origin, and they're looking for lost nuclear materials, a warhead or otherwise, then we have a serious and actionable problem on our hands. If, in fact, one of the two aforementioned scenarios is the reason for all the drone activity, that makes Biden's National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby's statement all the more infuriating.
Now, finally, I just want to add a few comments on the reports of drone activity here on the East Coast, particularly in and around New Jersey. We have no evidence at this time that the reported drone sightings pose a national security or a public safety threat, or have a foreign nexus. The Department of Homeland Security and the FBI are investigating these sightings, and they're working closely with state and local law enforcement to provide resources using numerous detection methods to better understand their origin. Using very sophisticated electronic detection technologies provided by federal authorities, we have not been able to, and neither have state or local law enforcement authorities, corroborate any of the reported visual sightings. The United States Coast Guard is providing support to the state of New Jersey and has confirmed that there is no evidence of any foreign-based involvement from coastal vessels. And importantly, there are no reported or confirmed drone sightings in any restricted airspace.
This brings me to my point, and a point that I believe has been and is being somewhat overlooked. Our federal government has become a behemoth apparatus where secrecy is the order of the day and transparency is a rarity. Secrecy is supposed to be the rare exception for the most serious of issues and subjects, not the automatic default for anything and everything the government does. Using secrecy as a default sets the stage for the co-opting of government by the nefarious and opportunistically connected. It's a warm petri dish for the bureaucratic deep state to manipulate government to their will. And when the government bureaucracy, the deep state government bureaucracy, is so entangled and controlled by K Street and the global elite, as it is today, the people kneel as slaves to the master, and that master has become the federal government. I talk about this to a great extent in my book Nullification, the Case for Decentralizing the Federal Government. The free constitutional republic of the United States was never, ever supposed to have an all-controlling, centralized government in Washington, D.C. The fear of just such a centralized control was palpable as far back as the last days of Thomas Jefferson's presidency, when Jeffersonian Republicans went head-to-head with the Federalists on the subject. It has been an issue our nation has been battling and debating ever since. But in this day and age, what with the many levels of greed present in the elected and activist classes, greed for money, greed for power, greed for being seen as correct, the dangers presented by a centralized federal government are tenfold from those of Jefferson's era. The secrecy surrounding the drone activity is just a byproduct of the centralization of power at the federal level, and a byproduct of a federal government that has gotten entirely too large. When coupled with the fact that this centralization of power is being controlled not by those duly elected to represent us in government, but by a bureaucracy that really answers to no one, that is never held accountable, well, Houston, we have a problem. A serious problem. That means we don't live in a constitutional republic any longer. Since the U.S. Constitution created our government as a constitutional republic, it presents a reality and a few questions. The reality is that a coup has taken place in the transformation of our government away from its rightful state as a constitutional republic. The questions: when did that happen? Who was responsible? And when will they be held accountable? When we come back, our segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally from our flagship station WGUL, AM 930 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Some people won't give you the real talk on drugs, but it's time we know the facts. Fentanyl is often laced into illicit drugs and used to make fake versions of prescription pills. You can't see it, taste it, or smell it. Suppliers mix fentanyl into their products because it's potent and cheap, and the dealer might not even know. Keep yourself and others safe by knowing the real deal on fentanyl. Get the facts. Go to realdealonfentanyl.com.
Nike is constantly political. Why? Cover. Congressional reports suspect Nike used forced labor in China. Religious minorities were ripped from their families, sterilized, sold to factories. Nike made shoes in those same areas. Congress tried to ban Nike's labor practices. Nike fought back with highly paid lobbyists. Rather than hiring Americans, Nike chose China. John Donahoe, Nike. Stop exploiting foreign labor. Serve your customers, not woke politicians.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
Well, you know, Frank, yes, with apologies to Leslie Nielsen, it does seem like they're telling us, don't worry, we're on it, but, you know, then they're going to go have a snack, and these drones keep going. And Gordon Chang, by the way, saying, you know, there's got to be foreign controlled, in his opinion. And he says they're probably distracting us from something else that's going on. What do you think about what's happening right now?
Well, he might be right about the distraction, and he might be right about the foreign control. But I believe, and this is just my opinion, of course, and that's all we're hearing right now about this.
Yeah.
All the alarmism, all the sensationalism, it's all opinion because we have no facts of the matter. I believe the government knows exactly what it is, but they're kind of illustrating their contempt for the American people. You know, they don't want to have to explain it. They don't want to. It's quite a bother that you people are asking us about this, to actually explain what this is. It could very well be exercises that are being executed by the U.S. military. It could be groups of amateurs trying to put together one of those drone displays. I mean, the possibilities are endless. When you go nefarious, yes, it could be faux nations off the coast that are using drones to probe and take pictures and figure out what's going on at sensitive installations here in the United States. All of those things could be true, but the government isn't telling us what it is. So with the Biden administration and after COVID, with January 6th and all those FBI operatives involved that weren't charged, it gives us, it raises an eyebrow. Mm-hmm. But to speculate on this is the wrong place to put our energy. We should be screaming that because they serve us, they need to give an explanation for this, because I don't believe they don't have one.
Well, and they do tell us that there's no threat, quote, that they're aware of. But it seems to me, yeah.
How do you know?
Yeah, exactly. In other words, these drones then do something terrible, and they say, well, I guess we now know what their intent was. But before, there was no evidence that they were hostile. I can't imagine, that you wouldn't, at least have a posture that says these are hostile because we don't know what they're doing. I mean, you have to at least make that first assumption.
And then the other avenue to think about right here is that you have so many amateur hackers out there that you can't tell me that they can't get into the frequency that these drones are flying on and find out whether it's super secure military grade encryption that they've never seen before, or whether it's just a bunch of amateurs. So hackers, take 15 minutes and do something productive instead of just trying to get credit card numbers. Be a hero for 5 seconds instead of the villain. Where's Anonymous when you need him?
Well, some of the footage that I see, like on social media and so forth, I'm very skeptical about, because you don't know what somebody doctors and then wants to put on social media. But nevertheless, the footage that we do have that seems to be pretty legitimate shows these things flying all around. They seem. I don't think that each one is being piloted by an individual. My personal thought is that they might be on some pre-programmed course, or AI is doing some kind of flight for them.
Well, this is my point. It could be a company that puts on drone displays, trying on a new pair of shoes. I've seen people saying, "Well, this is supernatural, and this is coming from outer space, and nobody could be doing that. That's here and on Earth." I can't go with the sensationalism. Is there an explanation? Yes, of course there is, because something's actually happening that you can see. Does the government know? If they don't, that's where we're in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
If the government doesn't know what this is, if the Biden administration and the DOD, the CIA and the NSA, they don't know what this is, then we're in deep trouble, because our government is just inept. We always knew that it had some challenges that it faced with being able to execute simple tasks. But if they don't know what this is, with everything they've got and the trillions of taxpayer money, we've got a reason to be upset.
Right. Yeah, because theoretically they know what you had for breakfast. Let's just say that. But exactly.
If they can find people all across the country with facial recognition because they showed up on the Capitol Hill grounds on January 6th, they better damn well know what's going on.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely agreed. We talked a lot about the drones, but you mentioned something, too, about the idea that, the authorities can search for people literally across the nation using facial recognition. I mean, they can figure things out. They can figure out who was there on January the 6th, for example, and then run them down. Well, you've got Adam Schiff, who's ascending to senator, of course, in California. He's saying that the Americans did not vote for Trump to see him pardon criminals involved in January the 6th. And he goes on to say, he paints with this broad brush. He thinks Trump wants to pardon people who beat police officers, gouged them, bear sprayed them, et cetera, et cetera. But Trump has said he's going to look at this stuff on a case-by-case basis, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. And again, with apologies to you, Kyle, because I know that you're in California. I'm appalled that the people of California have saddled the American people with Adam Schiff.
Yes.
The guy is a prolific and proven liar, habitual liar, and the guy shops in nothing but partisan sensationalism. And this is just another piece of evidence that actually proves that. You would think that every police officer that was on the scene there that day ended up battered and bruised and in the hospital, by these vicious people, when all of the film shows that it may even have been perhaps government operatives that were staging with the police officers in the worst cases, because everybody else, when the Capitol Hill police opened the doors, just walked through the Capitol looking around. May have been a handful of people that were getting a little weird, but there was no gunfire coming from the crowd. Only gunfire that took place was from the authorities onto the public.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So this idea that Adam Schiff is going to keep getting mileage out of being an ignoramus and a sensationalist is nauseating to people. And we have to be careful not to let the ignorant start defining the narrative again. Because the people, Adam, did vote for President Trump to pardon people from January 6th. Mm-hmm. He's got a mandate, you blithering idiot. So don't you be speaking for the American people about what Trump didn't get a mandate to do, because you don't have the numbers to say that.
Yeah, you're right.
Democrats lost, and they lost all the way around. And that means the country wants a pivot from the lunacy that you've been shopping throughout the Clinton years, the Obama years, and the Biden years especially. We're done with it.
Yep, exactly. Something else he says, too. He says he thinks the American people voted for Trump in part because, quote, they wanted something done about crime.
Or
like fentanyl and smash and grab robberies. Well, but Democrats never did anything about crime or fentanyl, stuff like that.
No, and they had more than enough time to do something about it. They were too busy with transgenderism and wokeism and DEI and everything that had nothing to do with actually executing government and its core responsibilities to the people, and everything about jamming a special interest ideology down the throats of people who said they just wanted to be left alone. This is another reason why I abhor people like Adam Schiff and his ilk. They will say and do anything sensationalistic, no matter how egregious, how untruthful, how unfact-based, just to make sure they can get a headline, get a vote, or move an agenda. And that's what the American people are tired of. And if you are a student of American history, we've been here before. This is the struggle between the Jeffersonian Republicans and the Federalists at the end of Thomas Jefferson's presidency. The people got so sick and tired of the name-calling and the sensationalism around the politics of the day that even people in Massachusetts and New England were saying, we should have another convention and maybe change this a little bit.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for the Treaty of Ghent during the War of 1812, there probably would have been another convention. That's how sick and tired the people were of the BS. So we're here today, and if Democrats and people like Adam Schiff and his bizarre, just unintelligent incredibly whiny faction on the far left don't get with the program, they're going to make their party extinct, because that's what happened in history. So, hey, Adam, either get with it or you're sucking your last 15 minutes of fame on the microphone, because I don't think you're actually going to be able to survive with this.
Well, from famous to, I think, infamous, you've got a CEO, Frank, evidently of a company called Comrade Workwear. And his name is John Haar, and he is evidently putting together a list or a playing card deck, what he thinks is similar to the playing cards that were given out about Saddam Hussein and other high-value targets with the invasion of Iraq. But he wants them to be all CEOs, and to tell people, I guess, who these terrible CEOs are, and they put them in the crosshairs, evidently. People are actually commenting and writing in and saying, do you have their addresses? I mean, this is, talk about sick and twisted. This is terrible.
Doxing in many locations is against the law.
Right.
So this guy starts giving out addresses that he should be acted upon by the authorities. Because to put it in layman's terms, that's not cool.
Yeah. And then people are actually writing in too and saying, well, they need cards for the good guys. Get this, like Luigi Mangione. He's a good guy to these people who are literally coming out of the woodwork at this point.
Anybody who assassinates somebody because of their job, when it is a legitimate private sector job, is a criminal. Not a hero. We do not live in Gotham. We do not lionize a real-life Joker. We do not support vigilante justice, because that supports and facilitates a breakdown in the law. You cannot be someone who is screaming for law and order and less crime in the streets and say, oh, except if you're going to go assassinate somebody because my premiums are high. You can't be screaming, I'm a law and order person, or I support the police, and make a comment like that. So decide who you are. You're either a really horrible human being, or you're someone who is recognizing a problem and actually takes the time and energy to put something together to get legislation in front of our elected officials to change the healthcare industry.
Right.
Not a big fan of government intervention. I really not. I think the free market works pretty damn well when you let it. And when you start getting into the healthcare laws here, it's all of the caveats and carve-outs that big pharma and the healthcare insurance industry have lobbied for through their K Street connections in Washington that are causing the problems and the premiums. If you let competition happen and you say, hey, offer me something, I'll buy it for less if you do a better job, you would see all these restrictions drop, and you'd see the premiums drop too. But we don't have that. We don't have portable insurance. Everything is hacked up into regions, and everybody's got their little piece of the pie in their own domain. And you have to be part of that. If you're not in network, if you don't do this, you have to be under this plan in order to get this service. Get rid of all of those restrictions and watch the prices drop.
Well, I think a lot of people are worried about these drones. There's no doubt about that. A lot of people are worried about basically, and I think this is kind of encapsulates this. What is the Biden administration doing, or the Democrat Party elite? Maybe that's a better way of putting it. Why are they doing all these things in order to, I think, create some kind of chaotic nightmare for Donald Trump to, quote, take over on January the 20th?
Well, because they're petulant children.
Yeah.
I know I've said that before, and it sounds kind of superficial, but it's the truth. Going back to the Clinton administration, and I keep pointing this out because it's that on another level. They popped the W's off the keyboards of all the computers in the White House. The Clinton administration operatives did before they left, just to be destructive. They thought it was cute, giggle, giggle, but it wasn't. It was literally public property, and they damaged it. those things had to be replaced, and whether it's $1 or $100,000, it still cost the taxpayer money to get it fixed. So this one, they don't want him to have a good 4 years because they don't see it as his administration serving the American people. They see it as a Republican and Donald Trump. So we must be the loyal opposition. Whether it's a good thing he's doing, a bad thing he's doing, it doesn't matter. We always have to take the opposite. Mm-hmm. And if we can be obstructive to it, that's our duty as Democrats. Well, it's not. And that's where our politics today is off the rails. If it's good for the country, it's good for everybody. That means it can be good for Republicans, and you got to get behind it.
Well, that's right. That's exactly right. But again, I just think that they really want to try to create some kind of, or exacerbate existing problems, believing that that's going to be kind of their gotcha last. It's kind of like, selling off the steel and material for the wall and trying to sell it off at, rock bottom bargain basement prices.
What happens if Trump has a great 4 years? What happens to the Democrat brand and all of the narratives they've shopped for as long as Trump has been in the political circle? If Trump has a great 4 years, another great 4 years, I might add, minus the COVID at the end, that was a Fauci facilitated thing, and he's a Democrat operative, so you got to believe it's the Democrats found a pretty good wrench to screw up in the last year of his Trump's administration first time around. What happens? People understand that they lied, and they did it for power. Mm-hmm. So they have to make sure that he doesn't have a good 4 years so they can say, see, we told you it wasn't going to be good. Now elect us again. That's all this is about. Mm-hmm. And when you have that kind of a tunnel visioned political outlook on your existence and the way things are, quote unquote, in Washington, D.C., then you don't give a damn about the American people. And that's the job of government. It's not to go and enrich people. It's not to go and gather more power. It's not to go and force agendas down people's throats. It's to get the job done that the people send you there to do. And we don't have that anymore. That's the threat that Donald Trump poses to these people, and they don't want their game to end. So yeah, they're going to try and destroy everything they can before he gets in there, so he has to spend at least the first 2 years of administration not doing what he promised, but fixing what they ruined. And that's why right now people should be screaming on high heaven. I said this right after the election, and I've said it again and again. The job has just started. Do not become complacent. The energy you were putting into this change before the election, you must hold on to and demonstrate now and continuously until we reach good, because just winning the election is not enough.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Well, one other quick question here for you, Frank, and that is the $15 million settlement, is that enough to change behavior in the media, or is it just cost of doing business for them?
Just the cost of doing business. It's $15 million to a good charity. That's because that's what they're going to have to, and it's fun to watch Stephanopoulos have to eat crow. But the media in this company, until they experience pain by people turning it off, and we have had a good number of people do that. When you have a Mika and a Joe, and you hear them lie to you, shut it off. When you have The View, where they lie to you and coerce you into thinking a certain way, turn it off. When ABC, NBC, CBS, when they have performances on interviews with presidential candidates that are so blatantly biased, turn them off. Because when their sponsors start saying, we're not getting any revenue from the ads that we're buying on your shows, then they're forced. Yeah, then they're forced to change, or they're forced to die.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I'd rather see them die. I think we're on the cusp of a brand new type of information gathering world out there. We still haven't figured out how to refine the potency of social media or streaming. And we're still addicted to the alphabets out there when it comes to news and information. But I think we're right there. I think we're on the cusp of something where we make these dinosaurs obsolete, and we don't have to stomach the nauseating words of the bubblehead, as Don Henley would say, the bubbleheaded bleach blondes that come on at 5.
That's right. That's exactly right. And this is one of the reasons why I think they're very seriously considering shaking up things in the White House press briefing room and bringing in new media or podcasters or people who will be able to, actually, record the message and report on it, rather than having, as you call, the alphabets, and quite rightly so. They want to craft the narrative about every single thing that ever comes out of the White House.
Yeah, let's not do that anymore. I mean, that's a choice, and we can make the choice. Let's not do that anymore. If I want to get in-depth on a subject, I've got 1,000 podcasts I can go to where they actually, as Dan Bongino would say, bring the receipts. Right. Here's the proof. Here's the URL. Go research it yourself. Just don't take my word for it. If you hear people saying that, don't just take my word for it. Here's the URL. Go look at it and read it yourself. Take the time to do so. You might find an honest broker of information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, precisely.
But when you've got somebody getting on there between the pharmaceutical commercials and talking to you about this is exactly the way it is, and no one else can see it any other way but the way I just told you, look at it with a skeptical eye. And if you find them to have lied to you, stop listening to them. And that's the same thing goes for social media. And then you brought this up when we were talking about the drones, seeing a lot of things out there that are obviously manipulated. With AI and what it can do out there, don't believe everything you see and don't believe everything you hear. Mm-hmm. Have a discerning eye. Question everything and ask for proof. You get to do that.
Yep.
It's not against the law yet.
Exactly. Well, and just in the time we have left here, Frank, do you think that with all these, quote, cancellations of Time Magazine, cancellations of subscriptions because they put Donald Trump on the cover, do you think it might actually go the other way? More people might subscribe to it because they put Donald Trump on the cover?
No, let's kill Time Magazine. Let's kill it. It's useless anyway. It's a propaganda rag. Why want it to survive? Let's turn the page on Time Magazine and make it the non-magazine of the year.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Our federal government has been co-opted by the globalist sycophants of the deep state bureaucracy. At every turn, this bureaucracy expands its power over both the American people and the states in which they live. The framers knew corruptible men would one day bastardize their elected authorities and attempt to centralize government in Washington, D.C. That's why they gave us the 9th and 10th Amendments. That's why they left standing the tool of nullification. In his book, Nullification, The Case for Decentralizing the Federal Government, Frank Salvato lays out how states can claw back their constitutionally mandated powers from the overreach of the federal government, doing so in a manner that prevents a second bloody civil war. Get your copy of Nullification, The Case for Decentralizing the Federal Government. Available on Amazon.com in Kindle form and paperback.
If you like the podcast, please head on over to undergroundusa.com and sign up for our Substack. It comes directly into your email inbox, circumventing the censors and the fact checkers that routinely interfere with the informational process. And as we head into Christmas and the New Year, please be sure to talk politics, current events, religion, and other pertinent issues with your family, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. When we have these conversations about these important issues, we find out that we have more in common than we do in difference. And that takes away the power of the bureaucratic deep state and those who would divide us, leaving them impotent to damage our republic further than it already has. You're listening to Underground USA. No fear, no political correctness, no wokeism. My name is Frank Salvato.